Welcome, welcome. This is the magnificent Mongo Slade, the boss, El Jefe of Three Count Commentaries. I am prepared this time to discuss the Vince McMahon resignation from TKO Group Holdings. No longer is he the executive chairman of the company, which was essentially just a sort of ceremonial position in the first place. He no longer has any role in WWE or TKO Group as of Friday, and everyone rejoiced and then immediately did what the mob always does, which is after they got their pound of flesh, they started looking for more. Everybody complained they wanted Vince gone. Now it's what did Triple H know? What did Kevin Dunn know? What did all these people know? Uh, we'll get into that probably near the end. My plan here is to do about an hour of this analysis. It may take a little bit longer depending on how well you guys are, bringing information and different things like that to the table. Um, so there's going to be quite a bit. There's going to be the talk of the resignation, of course, and we're going to talk about Janel Grant's attorney. Apparently, did a YouTube channel or a YouTube show where she discussed the case and answered some questions, and we're definitely going to go through that. I don't know if I'll go listen to the whole thing, but we're definitely going to touch on that because that's a very important thing. Then we're going to talk about the Donald Trump connection to this, which, of course, you knew was going to rear its ugly head. We're going to talk about that too. And then we're going to talk about maybe what's next. So I've set aside about an hour, and then we're going to talk this thing out. We're also, yes, it is as of January the 26th, 2024, no direct descendant of Vincent J. McMahon has a working relationship with the WWE, which started as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in the 1950s by one of the co-owners, Vincent J. McMahon. Vince McMahon himself has run the company since 1982. So from 1982 to 2023, he was the sole boss of the WWF, then became the WWE, and now he's not in the company at all. I had a short Twitter conversation with Wrestling Soup where we discussed, we thought that the only thing that would get Vince out of the chair would be death. And my response is he is dead. Vince McMahon has been dead for 3 years. Well, 2 years at the very least. Now, that doesn't mean that we had a funeral and that his body was in the ground, but he has been essentially neutered for the last 2 years. Just be getting pummeled with negative press. That's why he changed his appearance, dyeing his hair and growing a mustache. It's because he was trying to find a way to reinvent himself. And it didn't work, you know? And ultimately, the pummeling created a situation in which he is still alive, but virtually dead. Now, as before, we have to give the disclaimer. I am not on Vince McMahon's side. I think that what I believe about this situation makes Vince, at the very least, profoundly stupid. And that's just kind of how men with money are. They're arrogant and they're kind of dumb. But I'm not believing all the salacious nature of the lawsuit. Now, the reason why I don't really believe it is going to become apparent if you watched my previous video, but it'll also become apparent when I start asking questions again. For instance, why is Janel Grant's attorney going on YouTube or television doing interviews? We'll talk about that in a second. So, well, not a second. It'll probably be like 30 minutes. So we'll get there, I promise. So I don't believe that Vince McMahon is completely innocent. He put out a statement shortly after the brouhaha occurred about the lawsuit being replete with lies and obscene made up instances that never occurred. He repeated this in his resignation, which I believe was sent to Deadline, and then it was out. It was kind of aggregated from there. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with Vince McMahon's statement and his resignation, which I believe is a good thing. I'm going to explain why Vince resigning is actually a good thing momentarily. From Deadline, Vince McMahon says, I stand by my prior statement that Miss Grant's lawsuit is replete with lies, obscene made up instances that never occurred, and is a vindictive distortion of the truth. I intend to vigorously defend myself against these baseless accusations and look forward to clearing my name. However, out of respect for the WWE Universe, the extraordinary TKO business and its board members and shareholders, partners, and constituents, and all of the employees and superstars who helped make WWE into the global leader it is today, I have decided to resign from my executive chairmanship and the TKO board of directors, effective immediately. So, Vince McMahon is gone. It was, of course, announced to Nick Khan. Nick Khan did the announcement to some of the other sites that you may have seen. He also apparently did the announcement to the wrestlers prior to SmackDown. So it is now official that Vince McMahon is no longer a part of TKO Group. Many people believe that Vince was sort of threatened and said, hey, you got to stop this. I look at it in terms of it is consistent with his previous resignation in that it had a lot to do with Slim Jim. And Vanessa Loco is absolutely correct. It has a lot to do with it affecting business. Previously, Vince McMahon talked about the company had plateaued. This was something that everybody denied at the time, but most people who were not paying attention did not see it. I saw it because I was listening to the conference calls and not listening to hear whether they were going to talk about AEW or not, or whether they were going to talk about why talent was being fired. I was listening to literally to the business part. Lightshed Partners, which had been nudging WWE towards selling for years. They had continuously brought up that WWE should sell. And another thing that they kept bringing up was the lack of sponsorship revenue for the WWE, especially in comparison to UFC. And this was, of course, brought up again and again while Stephanie was the CEO. And it was Stephanie's job as the chief brand officer at the time to make sure that the sponsorship revenue had reached an acceptable level. She had not done so. So this led to a lot of people thinking that Stephanie was incompetent. She didn't know how to do her job. In reality, there was a poison pill floating around in WWE, and that was all the accusations against Vince McMahon. That became even more difficult when Vince forced himself back onto the board. Things kind of eased up a bit because he was mostly out of the way. He had sold the company. It was now owned by somebody else. Endeavor could do their business, activate their connections, do what they wanted to do, increase sponsorship. They got a huge sponsorship from Slim Jim. And then this happened. And then the Janel Grant lawsuit happened. And then Slim Jim threatened to cut money to WWE. And Vince immediately resigned. So Vince's resignation was great for business. And he only did it because it affects business. And Vince has always been a businessman. The issue that we have here is people tend to think that, I've said this before, that people think that Vince McMahon as a Republican is some kind of Bible thumping, God and country, guns kind of Republican. He's a Northeast Republican, meaning he just wants lower taxes and the government to stay out of his business. That's pretty much it. You look at the history that I've gone through on this channel of him going up to, trying to fight various taxes. And you see his interviews in Playboy where he openly talked about having affairs and doing drugs. A lot of this stuff is not new. The idea that Vince McMahon will be having an affair with a younger woman is no surprise. People believe Vince was having an affair with one of his secretaries in the 80s. There was a secretary, I don't remember what her name was, but she was the young lady who was responsible for delivering steroids to Hulk Hogan. And this was back during the steroid trial, and people believed that she was having sex with Vince at the time too. People believed that he was having sex with Rita Chatterton, another woman who claimed that she had no experience being a referee when WWF made her a referee. Well, Vince McMahon made her a referee. Her complaint against Vince was very similar to the one that Janel Grant filed. I'm very suspicious of that, but we'll talk. We talked about that before. But Rita Chatterton claimed that he had made all of these promises to her, that she was destitute, she had no money, she had nothing, she had this and that. And Vince McMahon came in like a knight in shining armor and took advantage of her, so she claimed. So if you look at a lot of this stuff is fairly consistent. So Vince, being a businessman, saw that he was starting to detrimentally affect business and decided to step down. It should be noted, however, and I'm just surprised that people are not saying this, especially with the new Trump lawsuit thing, the $83 million or whatever it is that he supposedly now has to pay this woman, is that you don't get criminal outcomes from a civil case. I want people to really realize that there's this ludicrous conception that you can be found guilty of a crime outside of a criminal court. You really can't. Legally, Donald Trump did not rape that woman because he was not found guilty in a court of law. There was no evidence that was presented. There was no prosecutor. There was no defense. It was a civil case. A civil case has completely different standards than a criminal case. The same applies here. Vince McMahon is being accused of sex trafficking, which is one of the most horrible crimes ever. But he's not being charged with any criminal issues, at least not right now, maybe in the future. Just like when he was accused of embezzling money. And I guess that investigation still goes on with the FBI raiding his house, the SEC, and all of them looking into, not only the money that he paid out, but also into the merger itself. There's still, I think, an investigation that has to do with that, about whether that was all done properly. But the idea that you can be found guilty in a civil matter is literally not the same thing as called being found liable. And what that means is it more than likely happened. They can't obviously say that it happened because there was no criminal matter, and the criminal case is of a much higher standard than a civil case. And people do the civil case because they can't reach the standard of a criminal case. So that in itself is a red flag. Whenever you see somebody accused of a crime and it's a family court issue or a probate court issue or a civil case, you should be suspicious, especially when these things involve large sums of money. So Vince McMahon stepped down. That was the absolute smart thing to do. Not wanting to drag the company down more than he already had. Not wanting to take away from the wrestlers, cast a shadow on the Royal Rumble as an event that was about to occur. He was very smart to step down and step out of the way. I suggested that he probably should never have signed on to be the TKO executive chairman. And if he had not, we probably would not be having this conversation today. That being said, I fully supported TKO in their desire to remove Vince. This kind of situation, whether it's true or false, once these allegations go out there, unless you can 100% separate yourself from the accusation, these things, people will always believe the gossip. Vince cannot extricate himself from this situation. Okay, his response is more than likely going to be. And then you look at his statement. His statement says is replete with lies, obscene, made up instances that never occurred. It is a vindictive distortion of the truth. A vindictive distortion of the truth. That means that there's some element of truth in the lawsuit. But then again, any intelligent person could know that there was an element of truth to it. I mean, there's certain things in that lawsuit that can be proven very, very easily. He bought her a 2022 BMW. You think they can't trace where that came from? He bought her necklaces and clothes. He sent her flowers every other week. That stuff can be traced. So, and before, we being honest, he had already put out a statement, I think, 2 years ago, that he had engaged in a extra legal affair with a paralegal who is Janel Grant. But everything was consensual, so he already admitted that he had this affair. So we already know that there are certain elements of this that are the truth. The issue that we're going to end up having here is he's saying it was all consensual. She's saying something else. Of course, all of this is post hoc because a lot of this stuff happened 3 or 4 years ago. Janel Grant worked from WWE from June of 2019 till at some point in 2022. Vince McMahon broke off the relationship with her. Let's go to the lawsuit to make sure that it was Vince who broke up with her, because that's what I want to. I want to make sure that's the case, because as we're talking about this issue and we're talking about this woman who claimed that she was sex trafficked, that this situation did not end until Vince broke it off. So it says, and it's on page 41 of the lawsuit. On January 9th, 2022, McMahon agreed to speak with Ms. Grant at his condo. During this meeting, McMahon told Grant that his wife, Linda McMahon, had learned about his relationship with Ms. Grant, that he was losing his condo, and that she would divorce him. He added that a public divorce would make Ms. Grant a headline. That's when he asked her to sign an NDA, and he was confident that Linda would not divorce him. He could remain in his condo, and Ms. Grant would avoid reputational harm. So Linda found out about the affair, and Vince decided, I want you to sign an NDA so that your name will not be associated with this, and Linda will not find out any more about it, and it'll all go away. Now understand, the Linda McMahon issue was something that people didn't talk that much about. Linda McMahon worked for Donald Trump. She was a public figure. She had run for office several years before this. She was not in the Small Business Administration anymore at this point, because, this is during the Biden administration. So she wasn't in public office anymore, but she was still working for Trump. I think she was doing one of the Trump's political action committees. So she was still a very public person. And if you're being honest, Vince had brought quite a deal to Linda. When Linda was running for office, a lot of the stuff that was brought against her was Vince McMahon being accused of rape, Vince McMahon having Owen Hart die under his watch, the deaths of like Eddie Guerrero and Brian Pillman and all this kind of stuff. That stuff was used against Linda. So, in a sense, Linda is an important piece of business here. That he wanted to save her some embarrassment, and also Miss Grant some embarrassment, and himself. That was the point of the NDA. The relationship would have to end, and that was it. At this point, the relationship was supposedly over. So the relationship ended not because Mrs. Grant was being sex trafficked and she broke it off. She broke free. The relationship ended because Vince McMahon ended it. That's what it was about. Interesting. She then had time to negotiate the contract of the NDA, 8 days, which is what we were told. She claimed that she was pressured during that time and that she had not had time to get her own attorney, even though she did. She had her own attorney. She then, despite the fact that she was under she then claimed that she was under pressure to sign the NDA. And that even though she was under such tremendous pressure, she was still negotiating. Vince McMahon offered her $1 million to go away. She said, I want 3. That doesn't sound like something somebody under pressure would do. Vince McMahon said, I'll pay you over time. She said she wanted a lump sum. Ended up going Vince's way on that one. She ended up getting the $3 million that she claimed she wanted. Vince would pay it over time. Then she claimed that Vince stopped making payments in February of 2023. And here it is, January of 2024, and she's filing a lawsuit claiming that she was sex trafficked. So that means in the entirety of 2022, she did not believe that she was sex trafficked. So while she was being paid, she was not being sex trafficked. The moment she stopped getting paid, however, she started getting sex trafficked. Very weird. Interesting stuff here. So Vince McMahon quits. It's a smart thing to do. His job was mostly ceremonial anyway. Now everybody can move forward without Vince and his sexual issues clogging up the mess. It's very unfortunate that this is the downfall of Vince McMahon into this nonsense. Okay. So what occurred after this is that the attorney for Janel Grant started doing interviews, which was a huge surprise to me, because why in the world would this woman want to argue her case in the media? Why would she want to do that? That was an interesting bit. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go to, what is this? Law and Crime. It's a YouTube channel. I've already watched this, and I've already poked out sort of the important elements that I want to talk about this. But we're going to talk about Janel Grant's attorney going on a 13-minute interview to answer some questions about the lawsuit. And I want everybody to remember as we continue, Janel Grant was 38 years old when she started having a sexual relationship with Vince McMahon. She was 38. She had never had an office job in her life. She was a caretaker for her parents. She was down bad. But somehow she still was able to live in the same building Vince McMahon lived in. And she knew somebody who knew him. And that person contacted Vince on her behalf. When she met Vince, one of these times, I don't know if it was the first time or any time afterward, he was not wearing pants. What 38-year-old woman, no matter how naive, went to a man's private residence, he opens the door not wearing pants, and she thinks it's a job interview? Under what conditions is that real? Now, you would have to think that women are children in order to believe that, with unquestionable. And that's my issue. That's my issue is always going to be how people did not ask pertinent questions. They just accepted everything in the lawsuit as if it was absolutely true. But this is essentially slander in legal form because there's going to be certain elements of this that are just simply not true. And that was done to do damage to his relationship. Yeah, she doesn't look like she was 38 years old because she's 43 right now. She's 43 right now. And she met Vince 5 years ago and they dated for 3 years. So that means she was 38 with no job. And here's the weird thing. She said she was living as a caretaker to her parents and then her parents passed away. Well, I'm pretty sure they both didn't die at the exact same time. So was it that, daddy died and then, you had to take care of mommy and then mommy died? Or was it that mommy died first? There was no specificity about which parent died first. I'm pretty sure her parents didn't just both croak at the exact same time. So that means that there was some period of time in which she cared for one parent and not the other. But here's another thing. If you're a caretaker, you have job experience as a caretaker. She could have gone to work at a psych hospital. She could have gone to work at a nursing home. She could have gone to work in elder care. She already had the experience doing that. She chose to not do any of that, but then to claim that she had no job prospects and nothing unless she had Vince McMahon. So let's talk about this. We're going to go to her attorney. This young lady is named Ann Callis. She's older than she looks too. She was a judge for 20 years. Oh, we're going to talk about that. How does she afford somebody who used to be a judge to be her attorney? Very interesting. But let's go through this. Oh, I muted it.
I want to talk about some of the allegations and the claims in this lawsuit, which are frankly pretty disgusting and pretty disturbing. First off, this claim that there was a threesome between your client, Janel Grant, and Vince McMahon in May of 2020. And she's saying that Vince McMahon defecated on her, would not allow her to clean off. It's very descriptive, and that he insisted that she...
So wait a minute. They said that this threesome in which she got defecated on was in 2020. Well, this was in May 2020, by the way. So that means she had been in a relationship with Vince for over a year at this point. Because she met him and started probably having sex with him in March of 2019. So she was engaged in sexual whatever with Vince McMahon for a year before this threesome supposedly occurred in which she got defecated on. This is all according to her lawsuit.
That she continue to, have sexual relations with the third person in this threesome, and that this was humiliating. So these are some really graphic, kind of disturbing claims. Talk to me a little bit about that and why your client continued to engage in all of this.
Well, there is a thing called trauma bonding that people that haven't studied it, and I have just read articles about it. I'm no psychologist or psychiatrist, but an attorney. But she literally felt caged and imprisoned by Vince McMahon. And
all right, so you heard this, right? So we created a new psychological concept called trauma bonding that applies to this case. So she couldn't leave. Now, interestingly enough, I had never heard of trauma bonding. I don't know what that is. And I still didn't look it up. Even after I watched this, I didn't look it up. Because a lot of psychological concepts are absolute bullshit. All right? A lot of this stuff is created specifically to excuse negative behaviors. This is a woman who engaged in sex, and she now has to come up with a justification for why she continued to engage in sex, despite the fact that he was buying her gifts and she could have left at any time. She continued to come back and come back and come back and come back. Come on. I know everybody wants to be the nice guy. You want to be a good guy. Oh, trauma bonding is a real thing. How come it never happened to you? Like that's a really weird thing, like Stockholm syndrome and these kinds of things. I question the existence of these things. All right? Because I never hear normal people say, "Well, I had Stockholm syndrome. I was trauma bonding." It was people get into situations in which they feel that whatever they are going through is not nearly as bad as what they're getting out of it. So whatever situation she was involved in, she likely had an analysis going where she said, well, I want to keep stuff. I want to keep getting things. I want to keep doing things. I want to live the life that I'm living. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm sure there are really people who get Stockholm syndrome. I'm pretty sure that there's a thing called trauma bonding, but all this is some bullshit. All right. The moment you start just believing random theories because somebody who claims they have a PhD. Now, again, I work in psych health. I can tell you that a lot of that stuff is absolutely more of an art than a science. How can 5 different doctors see the same person and give 5 different diagnoses? Only in psych can that kind of thing happen. If you got a broken arm, anybody, even people without a PhD, can see you've got a broken arm. But if you got a broken mind, oh well, then just about any Johnny Nutcracker can turn around and say you got such and such, and then you go see a different doctor and they say, oh no, I don't think so, you got this. It's definitely an art more than a science, and this is why psychology as a science is under such scrutiny. All you need to do is look it up. Look at how many fake studies have been done in psych departments. It's probably the phoniest science that we fund through taxpayer dollars. Anything can be traumatic. We already know this. You can suffer through pretty much any instance. And human beings absolutely are the most adaptable creatures. We can adapt to anything. We can adapt to extreme cold. We can adapt to extreme heat. We can adapt to mistreatment. We can adapt to anything. So there's no doubt that we know people who are in terrible situations and they learn to adapt. They just learn to accept it. I'm not saying that didn't happen. I'm saying that it's an excuse. No, theories have to be tested. Psychology is the worst science when it comes to actual testing. Testing that these theories actually exist. It's the worst, especially in academia. Now, where I work at is in, behavioral health, which is pretty obvious. It's just like a broken arm to some degree. You can tell when people are psychologically broken. You can tell when people are depressed, when they're highly anxious, when they have schizophrenia or whatever, or some type of disorder of thought or mood. You could talk to people for 5 or 6 minutes and tell that they're not all there, until or whatever. So I'm not saying that all of psych is garbage. I'm saying that a lot of psych is garbage. And what happens is people just start pulling these theories out of thin air without looking whether these things are really viable or not. And just saying, yes, this is it. This is our explanation for why she couldn't walk away. why she couldn't leave the job, even though she had gotten on her feet financially by this point. So even if it was the idea that she was only having sex with him to get gifts and a job, well, at this point, she had, by the time this threesome, where she supposedly got shit on, she had already had the job for a year. I don't know about you, but I'm okay back in a year. Loki says two people who don't have anything in common can form a relationship platonic from having gone through similar traumatic events. Maybe. But again, it sounds like an excuse. It sounds like an excuse. She went through this relationship for 3 years and it only ended when Vince ended it. That's the thing people are not understanding here. And then she only filed a lawsuit when he stopped paying her. Human beings can adapt to anything. That is absolutely true. So let's continue.
And degrading, the escalation of the degrading things that happened to her, it's important for it to come out. These are facts, and these are allegations that we hope to prove to be true, and they are true.
All right, so the attorney had a slip of the tongue there. She said, these are facts that we hope to prove to be true. And then she doubled back and said, well, they are true. Huh. And then she said that these things were escalating and becoming more and more degrading. That could be true, you know, especially if you're essentially a sex toy for a 73-year-old sugar daddy. He's going to get bored eventually, you know. Any man would. Any person would. I'm pretty sure she even got bored. But I don't think we're going to be able to prove in court that she continued. Like, is the trauma bonding so bad that you can literally shit on my head and I'm going to continue coming to work and continue having sex during this entire. Come on. Come on. That shit would have to be fucking trauma gravity in order for this to happen. She would have to have the traumatic bonding of the sun and the fucking earth, where there's no way you could get away from it in order for that to be real. There's no amount of trauma that's going to make you run away. Come on. And you just believe that. Just, I read it in a book. It must be true. A psychologist said it. Where's the test? Maybe I should have looked up the test. I didn't have time.
So, what does Janel Grant hope to accomplish with this lawsuit? She had signed the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement. It was supposed to be paid about $2 million over the course of a couple of years. So, what does she want out of this suit specifically?
She wants her life back. She wants ownership of her story. She wants to help other victims. This is relatively close in time, 2019 when this unfolded, 2020. And her hope is to help other victims, if there are other victims, to come forward, because she had the courage and the presence of mind to finally get this done and come forward.
What is she?
All right, so here is her attorney saying that she wants ownership of her story. She wants her life back. This is she wants to help other victims if they are other victims. Interesting. See, she's not saying that there are other victims. I want to talk about that too. We talk about that when we get there. She wants ownership of her story. What did I tell you guys before about people signing NDAs? What would be the reason? It would be because if you're a famous person, you want to prevent other people from trading on your name. There have been people who have made their entire careers because they're the girlfriend of, the baby mama of, whatever. And this is a situation where That's what she's trying to do. She's trying to take ownership of her story. What does that even mean? Look at how mushy that sounds. She wants to help other victims. Is she doing this for free? Is the attorney doing this for free? They're very, very, they're very much avoiding the the realistic element of this. Is that she feels that Vince McMahon owes her money. Why wouldn't you just not tell that truth? Oh, it's not about the money. It's about helping other victims. Well, you're not going to donate this money to other victims, right? You're not going to file a criminal case, right? You want to help other victims. It sounds good. Sounds like a babyface promo to me. But I'm looking at the actions. The actions are she could say, I promise to be quiet. Vince stopped paying me. I want the money he paid me plus more money. And that would be honest. And I would be like, hey, I can't do nothing but respect that. He agreed to pay you 3. He only paid you 1 or whatever, 1.5 or whatever he paid you. You want the money? I mean, if somebody owed me money, I would want it. It's common sense. By trying to avoid the money while also suing is ridiculous to me. If somebody, ram their car into your house, you're not going to go into a lawsuit and say, you know what? I'm just trying to protect other victims. I'm trying to stop this. It's like, no, you destroyed the first part of my fucking house. I want you to pay for the repairs. And I have emotional damage. And I'm probably going to have to live in a hotel for who knows how long. And you should have to pay for that too. Because that's the point of a civil lawsuit, is I want you to pay for something. You did me wrong and I want you to pay. Not pay in a metaphysical sense. I'm talking about pay in a literal sense. I want money. Lawsuits are about money. They're not about justice. It's not a criminal case. If he offered her $10 million to go away, she would take it. Nobody else would get a fucking dime and she'd go off into the wind. It's not about helping other victims. And that's the thing that kind of frustrates me about this. What are you talking about? Helping other victims.
She right now. Obviously she's not working for WWE and Vince McMahon anymore. That employment ended. So has she been able to find other gainful employment? I mean, what is she doing right now?
Well, what happened to her and what we allege left her physically and mentally absolutely destroyed. So she is trying to recover, and she believes this is the first step. Filing this lawsuit took such tremendous courage from her. She was in an extremely vulnerable position when she first encountered Vince McMahon. Her parents had passed. She was the primary caregiver for her parents. So already, besides being an inordinately uneven playing field between Vince McMahon and Janel, our client, she still tried to conduct herself, tried to be the best possible employee for the WWE that she could be under the most devastating and sexually depraved circumstances.
One of the other claims.
Now listen to this. She was extremely vulnerable because her parents had died. Again, parents. We keep talking in the plural. Was it mommy who died? Or unless you're going to tell me that this is the one circumstance in which both parents held hands and died at the same time. One of her parents likely died. All right. Okay. People very, very rarely die at the exact same time. Maybe they fell off a building. Maybe they was in a car accident. All right. And it killed both of them. That's possible, I guess. But is it likely? Not really. Not really likely. But Here's the weird thing. She was in an extremely vulnerable position. She was 38 years old and never had to work. So now my question is, what did her parents do? Was her daddy rich? Was her mommy rich? Did she come from money? How was she living with no income? How did that happen? How are you 38 years old? And look, you can be mentally handicapped, be in your 30s, all right, and never had a job. I know people like that. They probably should get a check from the state, all right? No full grown adult female who is beyond childbearing age. This woman is 38, all right? I don't want to go Stefan Molyneux and be like, what about her eggs? But she's 38 and she couldn't find a job nowhere. How hard did she really try? And Kevin Abreu is absolutely correct. I was thinking the same thing. She didn't have no friends. She didn't have a brother, a grandma, an uncle. She didn't have nobody. Oh, I had to have sex with this 70-year-old guy. What? I've known hood rats who have gone out there and worked at McDonald's rather than have sex with some of these guys out here. But then again, they weren't billionaires. And so when people say, who would want to have sex with that gross old man? He's a billionaire. That's why she had sex with him. Okay. That's not hard to figure out. And somebody mentioned earlier um, about the young chicks who go over to Dubai, which happens. And they absolutely go through all kinds of horrible shit. The TLD, he mentioned this. When you have money, you can do depraved and stupid shit, and women will let you do it. That's what Donald Trump said when he's like, when you're rich, they'll let you grab them by the pussy because they want money. They're attracted to money and power and position and these sorts of things. These things are aphrodisiacs, and they become vindictive when you cut them off, and they no longer have access to that money and that power or whatever. But people get paid to go over, commit sex acts, and then they get sent back. I mean, it is what it is. These things are called prostitution. And all of this stuff is this woman who was, and look, I'm not even calling her an escort. I called her a prostitute because that's kind of how it seems. An escort would be a step above a prostitute. But the entire time I've been calling her a sugar baby. I've been saying at the very least, she's a younger woman that Vince took an interest in and decided I'm gonna put her up somewhere. I'm gonna pay for her apartment. I'm gonna buy her stuff. I'm gonna, dote on her. And yeah, I'm gonna get my rock off every once in a while. But hell, he's 73. You know, this isn't for the long haul here. He could croak at any day. He just wants to enjoy himself. But this woman is almost 40. At what point do we start treating adult females like adults? She's almost 40 when this thing started. She was in an extremely vulnerable position. Vince didn't go find her and offer her a job. This is very bizarre.
That she makes. That's pretty disturbing. I mean, it's all pretty disturbing, if you ask me. Is that in 2021 she claims that Vince McMahon and this John Laurinaitis, sorry if I butchered that name, cornered her in a conference room, and
she's 43 right now, so that means she was 38 when this thing started.
Had sex with her, and they're saying things like "no" means yes and "take it" B word. Yeah. And that she's claiming other people in the office knew about this. So I'm kind of stunned by that. I mean, was this like an office? Was this like just a known thing? I mean, was everybody just like, yeah, that's kind of what goes on around here? I mean, what's going on with all of this stuff? This is really, really disturbing.
It is disturbing. What happened to her is disturbing. And I believe it was in Laurinaitis' office that they locked. I believe that. But yes, she was sexually assaulted, we are claiming, in the WWE headquarters under the nose of the executives and the employees.
So it's
my education from MIA.
All right.
Means a great.
So she's claiming, as she just very clearly said, that everybody was walking around while this rape thing was happening. It was such a violent rape. And I'm always suspicious of rapes that have potential witnesses. You know, like two people who get drunk and they're home alone, pretty much anything could happen. But just like with the Matt Riddle situation where, you know, Candy Cartwright says, "Oh, he raped me in a van with other people around." They were asleep though. I'm like, was the driver asleep? Like that's a basic fucking question that would pop into your mind. Is like, he wasn't the driver, you wasn't the driver. The driver has to be woke. The driver didn't see this, and you're not going to name the driver either. This is very weird. So you mean to tell me that this this woman, in clear view, was locked behind closed doors with John Laurinaitis and Vince McMahon and then violently raped? Uh, it's possible it could have happened. What's the likelihood? What's the likelihood? And see, this is why professional men should, one, never go behind locked doors with women. Two, never be in a room with a woman unless you know there is a camera with audio in that room. All right. My goodness, I absolutely, if I ever get to a certain level where I'm, you know, got my own office where I can lock the door and the only thing I'm gonna do in there is take a nap, brother. I don't want any women in my room. I'm gonna take the Mike Pence approach, okay? Where anytime a woman wants to talk to me, there's gonna be another woman in the room, or I'm gonna tell her there's a camera up there. There's a camera on you right now. Continue your conversation. Because I don't want to hear about this. We were behind locked doors. Because now this is a difficult situation. Where's there a camera in that office? If Vince was a highly intelligent, if John Laurinaitis, so I'm so guessing, they said it was his office. If he was a smart man, he would have had a camera in his office. All right. But sometimes people don't do that. And then sometimes, you know, the courts will say that's a violation of people's rights and all this sort of garbage. You know how that goes. There's always that two-part. Sometimes it's a two-party consent state, or you know, single-side consent state, or whatever. Those kinds of things happen too. So maybe, I don't know. This will be in Connecticut where the rape supposedly happened. I don't know if Connecticut is a two-party consent state where both people have to consent to being recorded, or if it's a one-party consent state where somebody can record. Then there's the whole element of privacy. Are you expecting to have privacy? Were you alerted to the camera existing? All this sort of stuff. But the bottom line is, men, married or not. See, the Mike Pence rule means married men not going behind locked doors or going to dinners alone with women. I'm saying that men in general basically need to have a rule where they don't hang out with women. All right? Just stay away from them. Because you never know. There have been men who have been sued for the stupidest fucking things. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he touched a woman's arm to see her tattoo. She came out later and said that he sexually assaulted her. Because he touched her arm without her permission to see her tattoo. All of a sudden, that's sexual assault. So that's why he all of a sudden thinks that men could get pregnant. Because once they got that kind of control over you, you'll say anything. That's the real psychological torture. That's real trauma bonding, since it exists. You know? Oh shit, they're gonna take everything away from me because I touched a woman I should not have touched. And all I wanted to do was see her tattoo. They're gonna kick me off TV. Well, I'll just say that men can get pregnant. Maybe that'll get the heat off my back. Maybe they'll leave me alone.
Secret in the office, or how is this working? Because
So I think
it's horrifying to me to think about this.
It is horrifying. It is horrifying. But Janel was in just an atmosphere of fear. I think perhaps some of the employees, or many of the employees, were in an atmosphere of fear, and that permeated her being, and I think it permeated the office, the entire headquarters.
So does she believe, and do you believe,
a culture of fear, an atmosphere of fear? Everybody was walking around afraid. I mean, that sounds like, you're dealing with World War II Germany, or Imperial Japan. You know what I'm saying? Like, these people go to work. It's a job. What's the worst that could happen? You get fired from your job. See, America thinks that, I don't know. I don't know if this is a uniquely American thing, but people think that getting fired from your job is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. Yes, it's destabilizing to your life, but in comparison to some of the other things that could happen to you, getting fired from your job is not the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. All right. Saying that we're gonna live in it was an atmosphere. It permeated her being. Listen to all this fluff she's using. It permeated her being. She was fucking with Vince before she got the job, and that was something that was skipped over in this interview, by the way. These days, if you have normal consensual sex with a woman and a year later she changes her mind and claims that she was trauma bonded and couldn't say no and therefore it was rape, that's what I'm getting at here. At what point do common sense step in and we say we're not taking this shit? Right? This woman who sued Donald Trump couldn't even remember what year it was, and people still was like, "Yep, 100% believe it." I'm like, what? You don't know what year it was? It was 30 years ago. Huh? He penetrated her with his fingers. What? Oh, okay. Sure. These things are so weird. I don't, it's so weird because all of it is, how can I invalidate my own accountability? How can I invalidate my own adulthood? She couldn't do anything because she was trauma bonded. She couldn't do anything because there was a culture of fear. Nobody ever stopped this because it was a culture of fear. This wasn't Nazi Germany, man. Like, these were not Jews in Nazi Germany. This was a woman in an office. Like, literally, all she had to do was open the door and say, "Help." That's literally all she had to do. Open the door. "Hey, something terrible is happening to me in here." I mean, she left the room eventually. We keep getting this college age drunk girl story. She was doughy eyed and didn't understand what was going on. Like, this broad was 40 at the time, man. Like, come on, bro. This is ridiculous.
That she was not the only one, that this was going on potentially with other women who worked in this company.
Whether they worked in the company or not, yes, the belief is that there are other victims out there. Just the way that the grooming of Janel went on, it just indicates that there are a lot of indicators that there may be and probably are other victims out there. And one of Janel's hopes is that by coming forward, she will give the courage of other victims to come forward too.
Does she potentially know of a
Wait. Let's pause right here, because there's two things that was said there that I want to discuss. For starters, the attorney called this grooming. This woman, again, was 38 when she made this Mcmahon. At what point do she have any agency whatsoever as an adult. And what is grooming, by the way? Now, grooming as a concept, I can believe it with naive, underage people versus significantly older folks. You're 26, you're trying to, get this teenage girl to come back to your house. So you buy her gifts and you do all this. And she's, young and naive and she's in puppy love and she doesn't really know what's going on. But when you're 38, come on. And then at what point does you being a good boyfriend not constitute grooming? Because if you're a good man, you're going to do some of these things. I mean, imagine somebody files a lawsuit against you and they say, he groomed me. I mean, he took me out to dinner. He bought me champagne. He bought me nice clothes. He bought me some makeup. He paid for my hair and my nails. He did all these things for me. I was just like totally in love. I was like completely like, okay, well, just being a good boyfriend is grooming. At what point is it not grooming? That's my question. When you use the term grooming, at what point is it not grooming? Is opening the door for your girlfriend, getting her to like you, is that grooming? Because that's what he was doing. That's what he wanted to do. Because that's what men do to women. I want her to like me. I'm going to do things for her. Yes, I want sex out of it. Absolutely. But I want things. She wants things. She wants a nice man to care about her and to take care of her. Vince McMahon gave her a job she was not qualified for, paid her handsomely at the job. She didn't have to do any work while she was there. Her only job was to be his girlfriend and to shut the fuck up. He bought her expensive gifts, clothes, necklaces, sent flowers to her house every other week. He bought her a BMW. He sounds like a right and proper sugar daddy. Any boyfriend with money would do the exact same shit that Vince McMahon was doing. Taking her out, taking her to WrestleMania, taking her to the horse races. He went on trips with her. Oh, it was grooming. It was grooming. And I want somebody to let me know when something is not grooming. What's the line between being a good guy and being a groomer? Because if there is no difference, then we should know that somebody is fucked up in the mind here. When does being nice become grooming? What was he supposed to do? Do nothing for her and expect something out of it? Because that's not realistic. That's not real. Of course he's going to do stuff for her. Especially once they started fucking. He's definitely going to start doing stuff for her. He's definitely going to he paid for her to have plastic surgery. Let's just keep going.
Personally, maybe people she had interacted with while she was there who can support her claims or who have had similar experiences?
Well, that's later for trial when we gather all our witnesses. But personally, she does not. But there can be empirical circumstances that she may have encountered that could have indicated that there were other victims. But personally, one-on-one, she doesn't have direct knowledge.
All right, so she doesn't know about whether there's any other victims or not, but she's hoping that those other victims step forward. There's a thing called a class action lawsuit. So what people believe is that the more people that make an allegation, the more likely it is to be true. That's the general consensus when it comes to human beings. We are social creatures. We are consensus-based creatures. If we all agree that it's 4:00 in the afternoon, or as we have right now, 11:10 in the morning Eastern time, we all agree to that. So the reality is it's 11:10 in the morning in the eastern part of the United States because we all agree. We're all on the same time. We're all on the same page. The people in Central are saying, well, no, this is a little bit different. The people in different time zone, different countries are going to have different perspectives. They're like, wait, no, it's 9 o'clock. No, it's 10 o'clock. All right. Now, the point of this is they're trying to have more people step up because then it's more likely for a jury or the court, like the court of public opinion already believes this shit is real. But in order to get a jury and a judge and all these people to believe it, if you bring in more people, then people will say, well, when there's smoke, there's fire. And it must be true because, there's look at this number of people saying it. As if people can't collude to lie. Like we haven't seen that hundreds of times in human history. But you can tell that she's trying to strengthen her case. She doesn't know of any other victims. So she's going to jump out there and then say, join me in this lawsuit, please. We could make more money together than we ever could apart.
There was also mention, or you show them, I should say, in the suit, there are these text messages where he's messaging her. This is purportedly Vince McMahon saying, hey, this guy wants to do this. And I'm not going to get into the verbiage. It's not how I talk. It might be how other people talk. But people wanting to have their way with her sexually, she's claiming, that basically he was trafficking her to other people, like kind of loaning her out, if you will. I don't even know if that's the proper term, but that's kind of what it sounds like. And she was like, yeah, next week, or let me rest up, stuff like that. So you have the text messages. Is there other evidence you have to support these claims? Because that's a pretty vivid thing.
Well, we have her firsthand testimony and gathering all the evidence. Are there other text messages out there? Are there? Yes, I think this was just the complaint, but now we are building the pool of evidence that we will present to a jury.
Now she's saying too. Are you?
All right. Now the text messages are those things are crazy. Now sexting, as we know, is a thing adults do. I'm willing to believe that Vince McMahon probably had a girlfriend and he was sexting her crazy shit. Maybe, I've texted all kind of crazy stuff to the women. I'm not even gonna hold you up. But text messages, just like DMs, emails, etc., they're private, one-on-one conversations that you have with people. If everything that you have ever done or said privately is made public, and then people who have also done this sort of thing that act like they brand new, like this woman here, this is certainly not how I talk. Your husband doesn't send you texts about bending you over on the sink. If he don't, you're doing something wrong. Shit. You gotta have somebody sending you something like, babe, I can't wait till you show up. I wish that you would wear that dress that you were wearing before. Maybe not as explicit as the text messages were in the Vince McMahon situation. Whether those were his or not has yet to been proven. But sexting in today's modern dating is absolutely not out of the ordinary. Now, the idea that she would be having sex with other people at his behest, that's an interesting one. That's where the sex trafficking supposedly actually happened. He was loaning her out to other people. Oh my God, the Vince McMahon naming his dildos after wrestlers is probably my favorite. That is, without a doubt, my favorite story in this whole thing. Because, let me tell you, I very badly want Vince to have a dildo called the Berserker. And I definitely want to know what it looks like and what features it has. I don't know nothing about dildos. I swear I don't. I tried to buy a girl a dildo for Christmas. And I was just lost because they all just look like penises. And like, I really want Vince to have a typhoon dildo. I want him to be that colorful. All right. And like, here comes the axe. Here comes the smasher. One in the anus. One in the pussy, the other in the crapper. What's, like, jeez Louise. Like, are you serious? You mean he got a dildo called Ivory? He's got a deuce and domino dildo? Is it two-sided like the ones in the lesbian pornos? He's got a tag team dildo, apparently. It's called the Usos. What is this? He got a purple one called the New Day. This is ridiculous, bro. I wish he was that colorful. He probably got one of those mechanical joints you see in the pornos. It's called the Diesel. You know? She hated the Razor Ramon. No, I don't like that one. It's too sharp. Like what is it with this shit? It is. He had one called the Snake. If he's naming, if he's naming them, there's one called the Snake, and there's probably a big E in there. The Road Warrior dildo probably got spikes on it, so she probably wasn't a big fan of that one. It might have been ribbed for her pleasure. This is ridiculous. They put that in the lawsuit that he has dildos that he names after wrestlers. Oh have mercy.
Or you say in the lawsuit, and she claims that Vince McMahon told her in January of 2022 that his wife Linda McMahon, who's a very well-known personality in her own right, found out about this relationship, so it was going to have to end. She was told she had to sign an NDA. She would no longer be working for WWE. You attach the NDA as an exhibit to this lawsuit, and she agreed to not say anything in exchange for being paid $2 million. So what happens with that NDA now?
Well, it was attached to our complaint, so we're trying to invalidate it pursuant to the law.
WWE just signed a big deal with Netflix.
She wants to invalidate her NDA, which is now public information, which is very strange. Like, isn't that weird? We want to invalidate the NDA. And we did. It's like, isn't it already invalidated by the fact that it's public? Like, maybe somebody smarter than me can explain that. Maybe, Stephen P. New or somebody can step in and say, sure, she attached the NDA as an exhibit to the lawsuit. These people are deranged. Y'all are deranged in the comment section talking about the big red machine. It's time for the big red machine. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Ooh. What? How unchristian of you, Vince.
And he's vowing to defend himself. At the time of this recording, we hadn't heard back on our request for a comment from John Laurinaitis. So, it's the whole thing is really, really creepy. We did get a statement from them, from WWE, and it says, Mr. McMahon does not control TKO, nor does he oversee the day-to-day operations of WWE. Well, that just happened really in the last year and a half or so. While this matter predates our TKO executive team's tenure at the company, we take Ms. Grant's horrific allegations very seriously and are addressing this matter internally. Have they reached out to you at all? I mean, they're at least acknowledging this, and okay.
No.
What is your response to their statement?
Well, I believe that we were, at least Janel was fine with the fact that they did acknowledge that what happened to her was horrific.
You talked a lot in the beginning of our conversation, or you mentioned grooming. And so there's a mention in the lawsuit as well, and it's a pretty lengthy lawsuit, that she was given gifts. I mean, she was kind of showered with gifts, cashmere sweaters and spa days and things like that. Looking back on all of this, does she feel like she was, I don't know, she obviously feels, it said psychological torture and abuse. I mean, does she feel like she was just targeted and preyed upon because of her situation? She couldn't find work. She meets this guy who's very powerful, and
yes,
things unfold from there.
Right.
Wait a minute. Now, this is an interview, which is, it's a friendly interview. It's two white women. But the white woman who is, the interviewer, she's leading the question. This was called leading the question. She basically says, oh, he's showering her with gifts, and, she feels, they call it psychological torture. Like, did she feel like she couldn't get away? It's like, what kind of psychological torture is, I'm going to take you to a spa day, I'm going to take you shopping, I'm going to buy you a car, I'm doing all this stuff for you? That's psychological torture? What? What? You're gonna have to do a little bit more to make this make sense to me, dog. This is bizarre, bro. It's psychological torture again. At what point? I've done all kinds of things for women, dog. I've never done anything to the extent of the stuff that these people are talking about here. Taking them brought to Nordstrom's. I've done some really nice things for people. Was that psychological torture? Like him saying "take it, bitch" and all this kind of stuff. If that's how they talk to each other, or if that's his version of dirty talk, I mean that's one thing, But you also are this should be noted. You're removing context from things, I have said things during sex that I would not say over the phone, or I wouldn't say those things in person. Again, those are private conversations. There's all sorts of things that once said in private to a person is in the context of you talking to that person. It is not meant for other people to evaluate. And that's where all these issues, these lawsuits and different things come from, is when you start entering third parties who then bring their own value judgments into these situations. These conversations, let's say the text messages are real. The text messages were not meant to be seen by a third party. They were between the sender and the sendee. Those two people who know what the conversation is about. They know the context of the conversation. They know the flow of their conversations. They know that each other are not serious. They know when they can joke. They know when they can say, baby, I'm going to fuck you up. It's not literal. If somebody else walks in on the conversation like, wait, what the hell is this? Well, we're not talking to you. Of course you don't get it. It's not meant for you to get. So when it comes to things like the text messages or the gifts and all this kind of stuff, you're taking all this shit out of context. She's trying to use all this as he was buying me all this nice stuff, but he was also being mean to me too. He was also loaning me out to other people and abusing me, and he shit on me literally. And then he forced me to sign an NDA, all this kind of stuff. I just couldn't get away from him. I was psychologically destroyed. She said earlier that Janel, through all this situation, was completely destroyed. What was her exact words? It was, she was physically and mentally destroyed, and that she's trying to recover. That was what her attorney said. She was destroyed. Interesting.
Right. She was targeted and preyed upon, and she, as I mentioned before, she was
targeted and preyed upon when she went to that man's condo looking for a job. She was targeted and preyed upon. She went to his private residence looking for. He didn't come find her. Even in the lawsuit, it doesn't say that Vince McMahon was sniffing around her, waited for her parents to die, and then pounced on her and offered her a job. That's not what happened. He was contacted by a third party about Janel, who clearly could not handle herself. And now she can afford a high price attorney. This thing is almost over. It's probably got like another minute and some change.
In a very vulnerable position, and Vince McMahon took advantage of that, and then took it a million steps further in the sexual torture,
Exactly.
degradation,
Timu.
the push-pull of trauma bonding, all occurred to her, and she's still to this day trying to process what happened to her. She literally could not get out of bed. She wasn't had any personal grooming. She was not really eating. It's really taken a toll. Besides the physical injuries she'd suffered, it's going to be a long process. But hopefully, yesterday by 5.
So wait a minute. Janel so destroyed she couldn't get out of bed. She had no personal grooming. See, she's not washing her ass. This is what's called ADLs. She's not washing her ass. She's not combing her hair. She's not leaving the bed. So how's she taking care of herself now? This was the first question that was asked earlier, is how is she taking care of herself now? Like, what is she doing for a living? Is she back to not doing anything? She's back to not working? Is that what it is? Is that she's back to not working again? Because that's what it sounds like. It sounds like she's back to, Daddy, I need some money. Daddy, I need some more money. And it's trying to be wrapped in mental illness. Oh, she's got PTSD. I think that's what it said in the lawsuit, that she got PTSD and anxiety and all these sorts of things, which I hope they go to trial and they call some kind of psychologist to prove that she's suffering from all of these mental illnesses. Because for starters, if she can't get out of bed and groom herself, how does she find an attorney to file a lawsuit? And this attorney is not from Connecticut. We'll talk about it in a second.
By filing the suit is her first step in the healing process.
And you told me that there's something that Janel wanted you to read on her behalf. She has a statement. Could you tell us what it says?
That she hopes any doors of secrecy have been blown off their hinges and that fresh air fills the headquarters. And she hopes those at the company, past and present, who fear speaking out about harm is a thing of the past. She wishes everyone peace.
And Callis, attorney for Janel Grant, thank you so much.
All right. She wishes everyone peace because, she's the ultimate babyface. She didn't do nothing wrong. She just wanted it. She was just a poor young lady who wanted a job, and she couldn't find a job anywhere on planet Earth. She had nobody except Vince, who had to be contacted by a third party who literally could have called anybody else. Interesting. The thing is, you don't even have to. Again, you're taking the text messages out of context, and we don't even know whether they're real or not. So the idea that people are like, this is the smoking gun. It's like, there's no evidence that this is real. There's no evidence that this is real. It's also out of context. So who cares what the text messages are? We don't even know if they're real or not. But if they are real, they're out of context. We don't really see where her response to any of these things are, or was she engaged in this conversation at all? Do they regularly talk to each other like that? Nobody has the answer to these questions. Why is it that his supposed alleged text messages are under such scrutiny, but we're not asking what her response was to these things? Now, in a typical sexual harassment situation, somebody would respond something to the effect of, stop contacting me, I don't want to talk to you, or they would try to block you or something like that. In this situation, she was actively engaging in conversation. Maybe she wasn't as vulgar as he is. That doesn't mean that they're internet. That's because they were screenshots. Those are not guaranteed to be 100% real. Nothing is in that lawsuit that is guaranteed to be 100% real, other than the NDA itself. Please do not make a fool out of yourself by assuming. All of this shit is just settlement bait anyway. The entire point of this shit is to get more money out of him. They don't really want to go to court. That's expensive. And it's timely too. I mean, Vince, as an old man, he's 77, 78 now. This thing cannot go to trial for like 2 years, 2 or 3 years. He could be in his 80s by that point. If he, continues to live, when death looms over him pretty easily in his 70s. So yeah, it's also possible that she, again, clipped these things are screenshots that are completely out of context. So let's say that they are 100% real. We don't get to see what her responses are. She could have egged it on and said, "Yeah, I like that. I love that. I like the sound of that. That sounds like fun." We don't know what they were into. Everybody's relationships are different. They're sitting around here right now, mainstream American magazines are promoting things like polyamory, multiple person relationships, but it's sex trafficking. If Vince says, "I want to have a threesome with John Laurinaitis," all of a sudden that's sex trafficking? Why can't that just be polyamory, that he's just into that? Well, because you're reading text messages out of context. So we don't know whether they're real or not. You think that they're real because they were sent to the court. That's not guaranteed. You think that, but that's not guaranteed. Now, the attorneys may say, "We looked into it," but they also claimed that they had nothing to do with the investigation that happened with the board. And the board, well, one of the guys who doesn't even work there anymore said that that's not true. Now, we don't know whether it was true or not. But we're going to go to cage side seats because this was actually going to come up a little bit later. The lawsuit says that the investigation was a sham because she was not contacted. So Jeffrey Speed, who was removed from the board when Vince forced his way back into the company in January, says, "I remain confident in our investigation, which included outreach to Mrs. Grant and engagement with her lawyer." He said the horrific nature of the allegations, but he is not at liberty to comment on what was or was not learned during the allegations. So Janel claims that she was not contacted and she had no contact at all with the board during their investigation. Well, the guy who doesn't work there anymore, he's not on the board anymore, says, "I did converse with your attorney." So now who's telling the truth? We don't know. But people read the lawsuit and just said, "Well, everything in here must be verifiable and true." I'm saying, look, I don't know how much of this shit is true and how much of it isn't. And we're reading a narrative here in which things are taken out of context. They had at least a 3-year relationship that's being truncated into a 65-page complaint in which they say things like, "It turned into a nightmare." So we're in a very interesting time here because You've got this guy who was willing to go public and say, we did talk to your attorney, where in normal circumstances, he's not involved anymore. He wouldn't even say anything at all. He has no right to say no comment. But instead, he stands by what he did. So if this thing were to go to court, this is something that could possibly be used to counteract what she's saying. But then again, we don't know if this guy's a liar. Now, people are saying this guy's lying. Jeffrey Speedy's a liar. I don't know that much about this guy. I don't know if he's lying or not. I know that he could have just sat and not said anything. There were other people who are involved with that. They haven't said anything. You could not get involved. You could just not get involved. All right, so this woman who was poor and destitute, 38 years old, I was taking care of my parents and then they died on me. I don't know. She's now psychologically and physically destroyed, PTSD, anxiety, all this, the whole cocktail. And it can only be alleviated by Vince McMahon paying her more money. She got an attorney by the name of Callis. That was the woman that was speaking. She works at a law firm called Holland Law Firm out of Illinois. And I was wondering why this woman would do an interview. Like, why would she be doing that? That doesn't make sense. If you're going to argue in court, why would you make public statements like this and argue the case in public? Well, clearly the idea is to apply some pressure to a settlement and all these sorts of things. But the second issue is that she's a politician. Ann Callis in 2014 ran for the House as a Democrat in Illinois. She lost to a man by the name of Rodney Davis. She lost by 40,000 votes, by the way. So she was nowhere close. The guy who beat her, Rodney Davis, in 2014, so this was before Trump, he ended up being like a huge Trump supporter. And it said that his voting record was like 88% of the time voting with Trump. So the reason why we even bring Trump up is because the New York Post decided to do an article claiming that Vince McMahon, sex trafficking accuser, met WWE boss in a luxury condo managed by Donald Trump. So now we get to the, I wouldn't call it the meat or the potatoes. It's a very interesting bit that we have here. It's a very interesting bit. So the New York Post says McMahon lived in a duplex penthouse at Park Tower, Stanford, a 36-story condo tower formerly known as Trump Park, Stanford, in the southwestern Connecticut town, where a 2-bedroom apartment could fetch $1.2 million. Janel Grant, allegedly, or now 43, was introduced to McMahon in the spring of 2019 by the resident manager of the building, which is still managed by the Trump Organization, although residents voted to scrub the former president's name in 2021. At the time, Grant was, quote, a dedicated to finding gainful employment after the passing of her parents, whom she cared for full-time as their sole caretaker. They started quoting the lawsuit a little bit more. And it says, in March 2019, McMahon invited Grant to a meeting in his condo for what was ostensibly a job interview. She arrived to the meeting with copies of her resume and thank you cookies. According to the lawsuit, McMahon shared details about his personal life, including the fact that Linda was an ex and it was long gone, and that their marriage was an arrangement on paper for business purposes, because, divorces are very expensive. McMahon told Grant that the meeting wasn't willing to give her a job, but to give her a life. Very interesting. So we're going to get into the rest of this stuff. So we found our way into trying to tie Donald Trump into this thing, because that's really what these sorts of things end up being all about in the end of the day. Of course, they talk about Linda McMahon, who works for Donald Trump currently, and that she was in Trump's cabinet as the administrator of the Small Business Association. They ended up selling the duplex for $1.9 million. They sold it at a loss, actually, because it was half the actual price. It says condo residents who do not like to be associated with Trump given his administration's policies as well as his inflammatory rhetoric voted to remove his name because the link depreciated the property values. Very interesting. So we already got this whole election thing rolling. Now we got the Trump element to it. The element that Vince McMahon and Donald Trump are the good buddies, best friends since the 80s. Best friends since the 80s. They're both accused of rape. Interesting. So like I said yesterday, I think, or was it Thursday, that this situation is going to end up being Vince's Stormy Daniels. A situation he never should have gotten himself involved in, which is top tier stupidity on his part. But then again, he's a man with money and he thinks that money can handle it. Turns out that it's not true. But I am wondering how Janel managed to hire such a prominent attorney. This woman, Ann Callis, was a judge for 20 years, or 18 years, technically. She was highlighted in MSNBC as a top female candidate. She was a Madison County Chief Judge, the first female Chief Judge in Illinois' 3rd Judicial District. And how did a woman who 5 years ago was so destitute she had to fuck a 70-year-old man for a job, all of a sudden be able to afford a former judge to be her attorney in a civil lawsuit about sex trafficking? That's interesting. I guess nobody's allowed to ask that question at all, which is I mean, come on. Don't be surprised if after the end of this, whether she gets money or not, this woman turns around and tries to run for office again. Don't be surprised. Oh, she's clearly not getting any money from the plaintiff, but there's certainly a political element to this, but there's a financial one too. There's certainly somebody's paying for this because Janel Grant again was 38 years old and had no money and no opportunities. So that means she's not good with the opportunities and the responsibility that she did have. So likely she was given all these gifts and maybe she got them and she still has them. I was asking basically, did she continue to drive the car that he bought her? He bought her a 2022 BMW. Is she still driving that car or did she sell it? But maybe she fell on hard times. So we're looking at this situation where this woman is doing what some people believe is a pro bono case under the hopes that there's going to be a settlement and this is going to pay everybody. Well, she had to get in contact with these people somehow. She had to get in contact with these people somehow. There's definitely some reason why this woman is going public when she doesn't have to. She's an attorney for a plaintiff in a quote unquote sex trafficking case, and she's putting her name and face all over everything. Now there's 2 law firms that is attached to that lawsuit, but only one attorney from both law firms is doing all the talking. personally, I probably wouldn't do much of anything. I'll let the lawsuit speak for itself, but she's doing what she do. Don't be surprised if she don't run for office again. This is one of those things where she's probably going to say she got. I got distracted for a second. My bad. Where she's going to try to use this to launch her political career, her already dead political career, which is the same thing that Linda is doing with the whole, she can't do anything. She's never going to win. And she's never going to win a case because of all this stuff with Vince. So she's basically just going to end up in a patronage position, probably for the rest of her damn life. But she's 70 as well. So there's not much going to happen here. No, none of this would have happened if Vince would have just been a traditional sugar daddy, which is, I'm going to pay for you somewhere to live. I'm going to pay for your upkeep and all this sort of stuff, but not do the incredibly stupid thing of hiring her in the company that you work for. You don't hire the chick to come work in the company that you work for. You don't hire that chick. You don't bring that chick on. That's dumb. That's dumb. We're not arguing about whether you need to have a front lawyer. I'm arguing about her being in public. I'm arguing about her doing interviews. This is that video I just played. That was the second time that she has spoke publicly about this situation. And the lawsuit only been out for 3 days. Now, seems to me that you would want to, especially put out the old, we're going to talk about trauma bonding and all this kind of stuff. Why would you want to put that out so early in the lawsuit? And especially if this thing ends up going to court, which it probably won't. Again, Vince is going to end up settling this because that's how these things go. He's going to vigorously defend himself by settling, which is what they always do. There is no jury because they're not going to any trial anytime soon. So it'll be one thing if we was talking about, picking a jury. That would be one thing. But again, the case only been out for 3 or 4 days. Likely anybody is going to forget that this shit has even happened once by the time the jury pool happened. Now, by then you'll have, you can go find this interview, maybe. But if you were really trying to affect the jury pool, you will wait until, the jury was about to get picked. Instead, we're doing all this shit now. So who knows how long she's going to be doing this. And she's going to, clearly try to utilize this to further her own career. I was hoping that Vince would not settle, but it's going to end up being a settlement. There's just no way around it. So the next step is everybody is saying that with Vince gone, there needs to be other people who need to be punished. They've gotten their pound of flesh. They got rid of Vince, but that's not enough. That's not enough. We have to now target Triple H and Stephanie and Nick Khan and who else knew. And what do you expect them to say? Like, what is he expecting to say? Well, I would imagine the lawsuit would speak for itself. I would imagine the document speaks for itself. That's what I would imagine. Like, you put your legal claim in the lawsuit. You just let the lawsuit speak for itself. What more do you need? Unless, again, you're trying to pressure for a settlement and you're trying to use it to get yourself out there. And then who really, not even gonna go into that. Let's not go into that. Let's get back into what I was talking about. Everybody's like, what do you expect people to say? You expect Triple H to sit at this podium after the Royal Rumble and say, "Yeah, I completely knew that this girl was being raped and I didn't do anything about it." Is that what you're expecting to hear? Like when everybody is online trying to be a good man, I'm going to be a good boy. I'm going to ask Triple H a hard question. I'm going to ask Triple H that hard question about the Vince allegations. What do you expect him to say? What do you expect him to say? Yeah. I heard the rape. It was like a lot of banging around in there. I was like, you know, somebody just giving it to her real good in there. But I didn't have anything to do with it. It's not my problem. Not my wife. I didn't have anything. What do you expect? This is an IQ test. I'm going to ask somebody completely unrelated about something like this with no evidence whether I can counteract what they're saying or not. It'd have been one thing if she had named, like I know she put, WWE corporate officer 1 or 2 in there, but it'd been one thing if she'd have named and said that, you know, Paul Levesque, aka Triple H, whatever his title was at the time, was outside the office or had walked into the office and saw it and he was a witness or whatever. That would be one thing. But you're asking somebody without knowing where they were on planet Earth when this thing occurred, what they knew about it, or what do you know about the relationship between people that it has nothing to do with you. What exactly do you expect him to say? What is a satisfactory answer? What do you expect him to say? That's what I want to know. So I don't know. I don't know what you expect these people to say. So to me, all these people who are planning to ask the tough questions, what's the answer that you're expecting? I don't know. What's the answer you're expecting? And really, Triple H is under the target because he works there. People are going to be like, because the idea right now is that everybody who has ever worked there is a coward, and Vince was a bully. You were living in Nazi Germany. Every day you stepped in between, you came into that office in Stanford. You were under a culture of fear. Well, if she's not responsible because she was scared, then how the fuck can Triple H be responsible? He can't be scared either. How the fuck can anybody be? You said it was an atmosphere of fear and that Vince McMahon's a king tyrant. That means he could fire anybody. So the atmosphere of fear affected Janelle, but nobody else. Because wouldn't that be an interesting answer? Well, I was scared. Well, yeah. I mean, it was a terrible time for everybody. It was a complete atmosphere of fear. Uh, we were all walking around on eggshells. It was horrible, and I'm sorry that happened to her, but I was afraid too. It's like, come on. What answer do you expect this guy to have? What answer do you expect him to have, though? The thing is, she mentioned his. She is in this situation. Wait a minute. See, now we're gonna get into it. We're gonna talk about power dynamics. We're gonna talk about power dynamics because this is another one of those canards, much like trauma bonding and all this other horse shit. Um, so that means that you can never have sex with somebody older or somebody with money because there's an improper power dynamic. Unless, of course, you're a public school teacher having sex with a student. They don't call that rape. They call that, inappropriate relationships or whatever, and you get, 6 months and a slap on the wrist. But if you're a multimillionaire and you have sex with a woman who is not a multimillionaire, all of a sudden, oh, my power dynamics. Oh, my power dynamics. That is another one of those canards that people hide behind to turn their brain off. I don't have to think about this situation because all I have to do is say it was an improper power dynamic. So I don't have to. She's not responsible for her own behavior, even though she's almost 40. It was an improper power dynamic. I can ruin your life with a phone call. Oh, but instead he ruined her life over the course of 3 years by shitting on her head and psychologically torturing her. And then she didn't even leave. He had to basically say, this is over. But my power dynamics, bro. He's a billionaire and he has all this power. She went to his house looking for a job, hat in hand, looking for a job. Everybody always talks about this power dynamic, and it ends up with regular fucking guys. It was an improper power dynamic. It was an improper power. What power? She said she didn't have anything. She was arguing that she had nothing. She's arguing that she was vulnerable. She had no job. She had no money, no friends, no cousins, no uncles, no nothing. So how is he going to destroy her life? She ain't got shit already. Her life's already garbage. Again, it's one of those canards that it's just easy to just throw that shit out there and just be like, that's what it is. I know what that means. And then it doesn't apply to anybody else. So my power dynamics applies to her, don't apply to Triple H, who has no power dynamic in comparison to Vince anyway. What is he going to do? Tell Vince, stop raping that girl. You got to stop. What's he supposed to do? She can't stand up for herself because of my power dynamics, and then other people can't stand up for her because of my power dynamics, and that don't work. That don't work. If you were somebody else, the culture of fear, the power dynamics, the trauma bonding, all that shit don't apply no more. All of this shit. She showed up to his condo. Come on, man. Y'all gotta stop being gullible. Just stop believing shit. I'm not even saying the shit didn't happen. I'm saying stop just believing shit and taking slogans and running with them because you've heard them before. All this shit is horse shit that people use to try to get quick settlements. My power dynamic. She just got this dude kicked out of a multi-billion-dollar company. Who's got the fucking power? Who's got the power? Who's got the power? Are you telling me that women have never, ever utilized their sexuality to gain control over a man? That has never happened before in human history? I mean, this woman, even if she didn't work there, let's say that she didn't even go to work in WWE, which I think is the stupidest part of this thing is that Vince hired her. She didn't need to be anybody in particular, and she could have destroyed Vince McMahon's life. She didn't need to be famous. She didn't need to be a paralegal in the office. She didn't need to be anybody. She could have just been a younger woman who sometimes saw him and could completely wreck his life. Kobe Bryant got put on trial because he supposedly violently anally raped a woman who worked in a fucking hotel. My power dynamics. I mean, he's a famous black NBA basketball star, and I'm a young white woman cleaning toilets in a hotel. Who's my power dynamics? Are you serious? You got to think about things, man. You can't just be like, well, it's just how it is, man. No, it's not how it is. Women have been getting people thrown in prisons, murdered for years, decades. But power dynamics. The biz is scary. You're gonna ruin my life, bro. How? Is she gonna lose her job that she didn't have? He's gonna what he's gonna do? He's gonna write a mean Facebook post, and what? She's gonna lose the friends apparently she didn't have. What life was he going to ruin, and how? Again, vague. It sounds good, but then when you use her own words, which means she didn't have anything, how is this going to happen? She was so scared she accepted millions of dollars in gifts and plastic surgery, by the way. And then the relationship only ended because Vince ended it. Because in the situation, he didn't want to get divorced. And end up losing even more of his money. And then she still did not sue until he stopped paying her. But we're just going to take everything she said at face value. No, no, nope, 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 nope. Right, right. It was the gravitational pull of his power, for God's sake. She kept coming back to work after, she punched the clock. She kept coming back to work because power dynamics. But power dynamics. I mean, what do I do? I gotta keep coming back. I'm gonna show up to work every day and live under this oppressive regime. People have quit jobs for far less. You got shit on, and you continued. Not only did you continue having sex with this guy for another year or so, but then you kept coming to work. And you're gonna find you can dig through every psychological textbook you can find to find some reason to explain that behavior. Trauma bonding, power dynamics, Stockholm syndrome. She felt caged and destroyed. Oh, okay. Okay. Sure. Go for it. Anyway, back to what I was saying before about Triple H. Like, what do you expect his response to be to all of this crap? You know? You expect him to say he knew about it and did nothing? What do you expect him to say? Now, the question that might be interesting is why they allowed Vince to come back even after they voted for him to not be there. Now, that's an interesting question because they did, I think, virtually unanimously vote for him not to return before he came back and sold the company. That's a question for Triple H and Nick Khan, etc. They wouldn't know they likely wouldn't know too much about the relationship about Janel Grant and Vince McMahon. They probably wouldn't know that much about it. I wouldn't expect them to know too much about it. It's not like she's gonna play with the grandkids or anything like that's not likely to be what have occurred. Especially if she says she's being sex trafficked. He's not gonna bring her to Christmas dinner. So he's probably not gonna know that much about it. But he can ask the question of they voted for Vince to come back. They voted for Vince to come back in. Now they can make up some excuse about my power dynamics and Vince. Oh, he had all the power, the voting stock. We did nothing we could do. Everything was out of our control. He's a maniac, that Vince McMahon. You can do whatever you want. You can come up with any excuse for whatever. But my question is, he's not going to be able to answer any questions about this Janel Grant thing because what the fuck does he know? He wasn't there. His only question is going to be how he ended up back in the company. He might be able to explain that. But the rest of that shit, he's not going to have any answers for. Yes, they did. Yes, they did. Stephanie and Triple H voted for Vince not to return. And then he ended up coming back anyway. That's the question that we might be able to get Triple H to answer. But any questions about this lawsuit, I mean, other than have you read it, which he's probably going to say, no, I didn't. Because most people are not, especially people who know him personally, probably did not sit down and read this trauma porn. They literally have other things to do. G Coolidge, she says she handed herself over to whatever the fuck Vince wanted her to do for the money. Wasn't happy when Vince was shopping her out to other men. Was really unhappy when he decided to stop paying up. Which, to be fair, she had every right to be unhappy about those things because that's what you call breaking the agreement. Him not paying her is breaking the agreement, absolutely. Look, my whole thing is if he did any of this, he should be in prison. The fact that we're not talking about him going to prison, this is not a criminal case. That takes a lot of the shine of it off of me anyway. I'm not taking this thing fucking seriously. At the worst, a billionaire loses a couple of $100 million. That's the worst that could happen here. The worst thing that could happen to Vince is he gets slapped with an $80 million lawsuit or some shit. He cashes out his stocks, pays it, and it's over with. He still lives in relative luxury for the rest of his goddamn life. His reputation is ruined, but his reputation has been ruined for decades. You know, Rita Chatterton called him a rapist on television in 1992, 1993? You're not exactly kindly old Vince McMahon. So it's not like he's trying to protect his reputation here. The worst thing that could possibly happen to him is he has to pay out some more money. So to me, this ain't that serious. If this was serious, it'd be a criminal matter. You know? So I'm looking at this thing saying, all civil cases are about money. Every last one of them. The fact that we're going out of our way to not mention money is odd, especially since it's so important, especially since she went out of her way to mention in the document that he stopped paying her. So the bid says Vince was out of the board. Vince announced that he had to be back to facilitate the sale, which is true. That is exactly, yes. But he didn't need to be back on the board to sell his stock. He could have sold it while not on the board and not chairman. He wanted to be that. He wanted to be in that position because apparently he had already talked to Ari Emanuel, and that was part of the deal, is that they wanted Vince to come back. And he had to force his way back in order to facilitate that sale. So that part is true. And that might actually open them up for other issues in terms of the other lawsuit that they have about whether they had a fair bidding process and everything for people who could have bought the company and all that shit. That's a different scenario. All civil cases are about money. Vince is he's stupid, but he's stupid and arrogant, but that's what people with money are. They think that they're bulletproof. But the worst thing is they think money can fix everything. They don't get that there are some things that money cannot fix. And one of those things is people. I'm telling, if a 38-year-old woman comes to you hat in hand with no job, there's no fucking, what do you think this is? Pretty Woman? You don't trust that person. She can't even take care of herself. She's 38. And you decide I'm gonna put her on the payroll. Are you serious? Are you serious? The thing is, he didn't stop paying her because he's cheap. He stopped paying her because he felt like she was behind the initial Wall Street Journal article. So that means he feels that she had already violated the non-disclosure agreement. So he stopped paying her. So now the initial story from 2022 was very, very close. Now we know that was about Janel Grant. So it's almost as if Vince was right that this whole thing was about Janel Grant. Because after the 2022 case, when I shouldn't say the 2022 case, the 2022 story about what Jim Cornette calls the illegal paralegal, right? After that issue, people were like, how did anybody know that? Well, clearly there would be information that only somebody with an NDA would know. So Vince did, he looked and said, the only person who would know about this, especially if they implicated John Laurinaitis, would be Janel Grant or somebody that she knows. And so he stopped paying her. And since he stopped paying her, she did this. Yeah, Vince he's known for that. But to be fair, there were at least in one instance he stopped paying for Stampede. What was that? Calgary, because he felt that Bruce was undermining the deal, and there was some evidence that Bruce was undermining the deal. This was in the Pain and Passion book on the Hart family by I don't remember what the guy's name is. Sorry, but the book was called Pain and Passion. Anyway, Bruce was helping to run another company, and Vince stopped paying him. Vince stopped paying, Stu because Bruce fucked it up. Now there's other promotions where Vince just stopped paying them because fuck those guys. But at least when it comes to Calgary, he tried to come up with an excuse. Now we do know that he will do that. He'll renege on the deal. And to reneging on the deal, he did that too with Tom Cole. He gave the kid his job back, and then he fired him again not shortly afterwards. After the whole, it wasn't the Pat Patterson thing. It was like the Mel. Was it Mel Phillips? I think that was the one who had molested Tom Cole, and Tom Cole just wanted his job back. Vince gave him his job back, and then fired him shortly thereafter because he wasn't any good at it. They also came up with some excuse that the kid was not taking care of his other kind of responsibilities that they asked him to do, like educational goals and stuff like that. So it's a crazy situation, but he's good for it. I'm not saying like he's an upstanding citizen. I'm not vouching for Vince's upstanding citizen. That's not happening. But it's clear that Vince is the way he does business is not always the best way to handle business. We know that he pissed off who was the guy in Los Angeles that he pissed off because he stopped paying him. I forget what that guy's name is, but it was like wrestling from Hollywood or something like that in California. He went and bought the territory, didn't pay that guy. He stopped paying somebody else too. We know he stopped paying Stu. He did that shit a lot at the time, and his deals were almost always the same. So when you have this NDA situation, and you're like, Vince made a deal for a certain amount of money, and then he would pay you in increments, and then he would find some reason to stop paying you. So he made the same deal with I don't want to say Johnny Doyle because I know that's not his name. Johnny Doyle was in the 50s. It was somebody. It was somebody. But somebody had the territory out in California. Vince went over there, talked the guy into selling him the territory, started paying the guy, and then just stopped. It was another Vince move to put people on the payroll, and then he'll just fire them out of nowhere. He did that to Larry Madisick. Larry Madisick, he when he helped him take over St. Louis, he put Larry Madisick on payroll. He worked, I think, in the magazine. I think Larry Madisick said. And then once Vince had really gotten a foothold in St. Louis, he fired Larry Madisick too. So there's a lot of things that Vince does. Vince does people dirty. So it's not like he's an innocent angel who didn't do nothing. You know, like he has a history of fucking people over. You know, he does that a lot. He'll come in and I mean, they did it with all these guys just at Evolve 3 years ago. They bought Evolve. They hired all of the wrestlers. They hired some of the staff. Gabe Sapolsky was one of those people. And then 2 years later, they fired pretty much everybody. They fired pretty much everybody. I mean, they promise you a job. If you give up your territory, they give you a salary and a job. The only people he kept that shit with was Gorilla Monsoon. I think that might have been the only person who he promised a job for life and and actually paid them was probably Gorilla Monsoon. I think everybody else got fucked. I mean, that's how Vince does business. Well, with wrestling promoters and wrestlers and stuff. He seems to be doing okay when it comes to TV execs, except for when they piss him off. So Vince plays hardball with people. It was stupid to stop paying her. Even if you thought she was, you probably could have paid her in slower and slower increments. Like if you was paying her $500,000 a quarter or something like that, and you cut it to like $250. But I don't see why you just didn't pay her the entire amount and just call it a day. You know? Yeah. WWA was Dick the Bruiser, and I think there was some really ugly things that occurred in history. And Vince is not exactly the guy you want to go to bat for defending. I just wanted this story to make more sense. You know, I don't like the idea of we're going to hide behind slogans like power dynamics and trauma bonding to explain something that occurred for 3 years and that most adults, if even half of a percent of any of that stuff happened, they would have left and you wouldn't have had a chance to trauma bond. Oh, we talked about our terrible life stories. It's like, okay, yeah, but all of a sudden you're having sex with him and he's buying you new cars? Like, I don't know about that. I've talked about my terrible life with a lot of other people. I've never had that situation. Never experienced that before in my life. It sounds like something that people are fucking making up. But that doesn't mean it's not true. It just sounds made up to me. And I don't like psychology. Psychology is one of those things that I went to college. I've been paying attention. I know that psychology is a very soft field. It's a very soft science. It's not saying it's not a science. It's just a very soft science. That's more art than science. And a lot of the studies are garbage. A lot of the outcomes that come from it are garbage. And then what people do is they take these garbage things and they bring them into the real world. And I'm saying, let's not do that. Because the only way for you to explain how this woman was involved in a relationship with this man for 3 years, in which she supposedly was brutalized with dildos and shit on, and then passed around, was that he had some kind of puppet string on her that when he tugged it, she couldn't do nothing but come. And I don't mean that in a double entendre kind of way. Like she was on a leash. like she was tied up in a basement. You know, like, nah, man, come on. You know, come on. We what we do is we strip away the agency of females, and I don't like that either. That's why I keep saying how old she was. We keep stripping. We keep looking for reasons to strip away people's agency, and they can't explain their own behavior. And all of a sudden, well, it was somebody else's fault because they have more power than me. So it's their fault that I can't do anything. And you start asking questions, and they start calling you a misogynist and all this kind of stuff. And that's why I'm like, look, without even going too far. And I do the same thing when I talk about like drug dealers and shit. Like when you talk about drug dealers, like, oh man, they was born in bad circumstances. I mean, the daddy's in jail and mama's a crackhead, and what do you expect them to do? And I say, well, there's certain occasions where I can say, okay, but at the end of the day, everything is a choice, which means if you make the decision based off of bad information, then you made a bad decision off of bad information. Own it. Take it and own it. But what ends up happening is people say, well, I had imperfect information. Therefore, I can't be responsible. It's like, no, you are. You sold drugs when you could have went out and shoveled snow. You could have went out and cut the grass. You could have went and worked at the grocery store, stacking boxes and working in the meat department. You could have gone with your uncle and, helped put up drywall or whatever the fuck he did for a living. You chose to go out and sell dope. I hold people accountable for their behavior. This woman is an adult. You telling me she didn't have one cousin, one nephew, one niece, one grandparent, one best friend, nobody she could contact for a job? That's already suspicious. You're 38. You're not 14. If you're 15, 16, I can see how certain opportunities will pass you by. But when you're 38 and you say, well, I have a history of being a caretaker, the first thing you would have done is say, I have history taking care of old people, assuming her parents were old or sick. And you would have went into that field. Because at least now you can get paid real money, assuming that she was probably getting some kind of stipend from the state for taking care of her parents. She was 38 with no job. Now I'm saying, like, okay, then I started getting, next level. What did her parents do for a living? How were they alive? Where were they living? Like, were they in like trailer park or something like that? Or that didn't seem to be the case. We're not hearing that she was like poor and destitute. We just hear that she was in a vulnerable position and that she didn't have any money. She had no job. Okay. So that could explain why. Well, it doesn't matter whether she was poor or not, because the idea is she's dealing with a man who has so much money that all she got to do is be a little bit pliable and she can get some stuff out of him. She really could have gotten a lot out of him without getting a full-time job, which is the part that really kind of throws my way, because a sugar daddy usually wouldn't hire you. He spoil you, sure, but he probably wouldn't hire you. That was the stupid thing. But then again, this woman didn't need to be on WWE's payroll to destroy this guy's life. I didn't realize that I had been on this line for 2 hours already. Vince is awful, but Janelle was fine with all the horrible sex in exchange for gifts until the money stopped. Then to go after Triple H and Stephanie, who was trying to keep Vince out, is weird. Well, that's the goofy fan base and the wrestling media. I don't pay that much attention. We don't know what they know. We don't know where they were. I don't think we need to know. They're not principally involved in this. Grant did not name them. Now everybody's attacking Brock Lesnar too. And I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I hope this thing goes to trial, is what I want. I want this to go to trial. I don't even want it dropped. Like that would be the whole thing with me. I would say this is bullshit. Just throw it out. I'm saying we're looking at her lawsuit, and these are all the problems I see in her lawsuit. These are the problems I see with her attorney. These are the problems I see with all this stuff. And I want the court to answer these questions. I want there to be another attorney that when this attorney goes out there and tries to explain how they can have a 3-year relationship, you know, how she didn't end it. She never had the power to end it. Because my power dynamics, she can't possibly end it. Like, come on. When Vince couldn't buy out the promotions, he just took all the talent. That's what happens with the AWA and the UWF. Well, he didn't buy UWF. Jim Crockett did. He didn't take all the talent from UWF either. He just took Junkyard Dog, and the UWF was Mid South. So he just took the Junkyard Dog, and I think he took Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and he took Butch Reed, and he took Ted DiBiase. So he did kind of take the talent. Those were the top guys. So yeah, he did take those. And Bill Watts wasn't going to sell, and he couldn't beat Bill Watts in Louisiana. He tried it, and he tried running head to head with Bill Watts. It didn't work. You find it's very difficult to run head to head with an established name, no matter where. He tried it in like St. Louis. It really didn't work either. I mean, he won in the end because he had more money and he had bigger stars. And, once you start hosting big events in these cities, it kind of, you go from house shows to, SummerSlam is in this city and WrestleMania is in this city. It's a little bit different. Vince tried to Vince the woman, only for her to come out with it, and now TKO just Vince. Are we trauma bonding to biz? I came from a domestic violence home too. I already know. Trust me, I've been there. But you're talking about women who, at least in some cases, are lower income, have children. This woman doesn't even seem to have any children. She was 38 with no kids and no job. Having an anchor of my children need a father is a good excuse, or we were married and I wanted to try to make this thing work. We had been together for so long. Their whole relationship was 3 years. It's not like you were together for 10 years and then things started getting ugly. There are some tough situations. I get it. But that is that's not a good enough excuse. Just because it happens to some people doesn't mean it happened in this situation. People adopt things as a way to sway people's emotions. That's what I mean by we live in a feelings-based society. Everybody knows that if you drop certain buzzwords in these articles and in these interviews, people will say, oh my God, they was trauma bound. That's so tough. The power dynamics between the two of these people, they're not thinking about anything else. They're not even engaging with the thought. They're engaging with their feelings. I don't like Vince McMahon. I believe all this shit to be true. I'm like, Vince is one of my favorite white people, but even some of this shit got to be true. Clearly, we know that he was banging the chick. That part is true. He was buying her stuff. That part can be proven true. But I'm questioning whether she really enjoyed a lot of this sex stuff, because I don't know. I don't know. And I don't know what kind of relationship they had. I don't know what kind of relationship Vince has. All I know is Vince has said publicly that he's engaged in all kinds of crazy sex and that he's had affairs, usually with younger women, and most of the time with women who worked in WWE, which is he has a history of that. So there's things that are within his character that you can see in this lawsuit and say, okay, but then there's the absurd. The dildos named after wrestlers. The shit on the forehead. How you were raped in a locked office while other people are walking around outside. I'm like, come on. There's just no way that I'm accepting this whole thing whole cloth. She met with other people, sure. And those people didn't hire her because she had no skills, no education. We're not going to keep going down this rabbit hole. My phone's about to die. Thank you everybody for stopping by, man. The Biz is in here fighting the good fight, trying to get me to 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 look at this thing from her perspective, and I already have. Again, I've taken into account that people are down on their luck, and they say, "Man, I don't know what I can do. Maybe I'll try this." I've taken that into account, but you show up to a man's private residence and he's not wearing pants, we're off to the races. At some point, you have to be an adult. You know, at some point, you have to be responsible for yourself. You know, otherwise, we might as well just. I hate to put it this way. Why do we let women vote? Because we never had any of this shit before we started letting women vote. There was no trauma bonding. There was none of this horse shit. We need to go back to arranged marriages if women cannot choose their own sexual partners without more power dynamics. Then, well, we might as well just have their fathers marry them off because they're not responsible. So either you accept that women don't have responsibility, or you say that women are giant children and they need their daddies to literally hand them off to their husband who was chosen by their father, and you take care of her now. Either you believe that, or you believe that these women are responsible people, adults who are capable of picking their own sexual partners, picking their own workplaces, picking their own sexual activities, and they can do that without turning around and filing lawsuits afterwards. So which one do you believe? Because I tend to believe that women are human beings just like you and me, capable of making decisions just like you and me. They'll make decisions they don't like. They say, "Oh man, I let this guy shit on me, piss on me." These people are running around here right now. Let their baby daddies cheat on them. They taking them back. He gave me herpes. They take them back. People do stupid shit. I'm not saying that they don't. I'm saying you are responsible if you keep putting up with it. You can't then turn around and say you were sex trafficked. And that's me accepting that everything in the document is true. If everything in the document is true, I still say you are responsible for your own behavior. You asked for the job. You continue to come back to the job. You let the man defecate on you and you continue to have sex with him. So either you believe that she needs to be in an arranged marriage where she needs to be a ward of the state because her father is dead. So she needs to be a ward of the state where somebody picks her husband for her and says, "You stay with this man and you cannot leave." Or you let her be an adult and go out and make her own decisions. Because if she makes her own decisions and it gets her shit on, literally, then she asks for it. You can't turn around and turn her into a victim. Oh, poor baby. Oh, poor baby. No, 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 no. We hold teenage boys to incredibly higher standards than we hold adult women. If a 17-year-old boy was in the middle of this situation, people will be looking at you like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But it's a 38-year-old woman. All of it. Well, she'd have been 40 when the shit situation happened. So you're like, wait a minute, you're not responsible. Poor sugar, poor sugar booger. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Get the fuck out of here. Then her uncle needs to take ownership of her and then marry her off. You know, like that's ridiculous. This is ridiculous, bro. No, no way. People have the right to ask you to do fucked up shit, and it's up to you to whether you want to do it or not. You know, like there's people who get asked to do weird shit, like to be in threesomes. I had a friend, right? Him and his wife had a threesome. They chose her cousin to have the threesome with. After the threesome, the wife spazzed out, attacked him with a screwdriver. Now, wait a minute. You, as a fully grown adult, decided to engage in a threesome with your husband and your cousin, but you don't like how that threesome turned out. So now you're going to attack him as if he cheated on you. That's the kind of deranged shit that I'm thinking about here. Like, no, if you agreed to have sex with these two guys, it'd have been one thing if you just said, I never wanted to have sex with these guys. And I didn't. And they had to force me. It's another thing for you to say, oh, they paid me and I eventually did it. Like, okay, well, if you got paid to do it, then you consented. They found a way to go around your defenses. I don't want to go to work every day, but I'm incentivized to do so. So, I mean, it just is how it is. I cannot turn this into a situation where I feel victimized. If at any point I do feel victimized, I feel strongly enough in my belief that I will not go. Eventually, you have to try treating people like adults. You have to stop taking shit out of context and just reading it and being like, oh, what a monster. Like, this stuff is out of context. So, yeah, it is. You know, like, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in people's lives that we don't understand as people who are not living that life. Okay? People's relationships are between them. It's not for third and fourth parties to jump in and be like, oh, this is the right thing or the wrong thing, or this is wrong. What's wrong with us right now is we have a society of people who think that they can post hoc justify everything. You have teenage girls right now who are hitting up the college quarterback, the quarterback for the football team. She don't care that she's the third or fourth girl he's fucked that night. But then she does it. 2 weeks later, he's laughing about it with her friends. Or he's laughing about it with his own friends. She feels guilty about it. All of a sudden, I just want to turn this into a rape case. And nobody's going to stand up and say, no, you did that on your own. You're an adult. It didn't work out the way that you wanted it to. It's a learning experience. It becomes everything you feel is valid. Oh, it's so valid that this happened to you. Instead of saying, that sucks. But now you know not to be out here just fucking random guys. You know, it's very strange. I don't blame her for accepting gifts. I don't blame her for accepting a job. Escorts are real. Sugar daddies and sugar babies are real. These are real situations. My issue is now all of a sudden it's over. And she's like, I was sex trafficked. She could have filed a lawsuit for $2 million and said, in the lawsuit, 10 pages, I had a relationship with Vince McMahon. He promised to pay me a certain amount of money. He has not paid me. File that lawsuit. You file a lawsuit claiming that you were sex trafficked, like you're some illegal immigrant with a leash around her neck. Oh, come on. Come on. If that don't make you roll your eyes, bro, like I don't get it. You don't get it. I'm looking at this situation completely different. Completely different. She didn't have to do shit. And the idea that she felt like she had to at 40 years old is ridiculous. Did you live in a world with no television? With no internet? Is that really how it is? You mean to tell me that you literally lived your entire adult life with no income, but no access to the internet or anything? You couldn't have looked up that, hey, this guy having an inappropriate relationship with me. Hey, you got him over a fucking barrel. And everybody would have known that. Even Vince knew that. Everybody knew this was an inappropriate relationship. But if people say, and I've seen it, the boss is having sex with one of his secretaries. If she ain't saying nothing, what am I supposed to do? Is it supposed to be incumbent upon me to step in and say, you can't do that? You can't have a perfectly healthy relationship between two adults because of your power dynamics. So what you should do is you should be her secretary, and then nobody can say anything. You should put yourself as her assistant. Then she'll have the greater power. No, because it doesn't work that way. We have an entire industry built up about this kind of shit, and it ain't going nowhere no time soon. So ultimately, we're in an interesting case. 2 hours and 30 minutes. This has been a marathon. I thank everybody for participating. Hopefully, people hit the like button. Feel free to disagree with me. I don't have a problem with people disagreeing. You know, so it is what it is. But I'm not going to be a kiss ass. I'm not going to be a simp and just believe everything this woman said because she put it in a lawsuit. I know that there's a lot of manipulation going on. A lot of, because almost all of these situations end up with she's mentally and physically destroyed. And you're like, mentally and physically destroyed. Did any doctors see this woman? You know, what were the diagnoses? What doctor did she go to and was diagnosed with, PTSD, and it was directly attached to this and not maybe the trauma of her parents dying, because we don't know how her parents died. She's voluntarily offering all of these little details, but then the details are not really fleshed out. You're going to write a story with all these details, fill them in. But most of that stuff wasn't important anyway. So here's a crazy thing. I want to close on this. There is a book called Make Me Want to Holler. That book made me so fucking mad because this is one of the things I have seen a lot of boys do that pisses me off. In that book, he tells the story. I think his name is Nathan McCall. He tells a story of one of his friends taking a girl into a room. He has sex with the girl, and then he comes out of the room, and then another boy goes in. It's running the train, but the girl is kind of in the room. She can't get out. I have seen boys do that. I know that boys do that. There's his situation with frat parties, that kind of thing happens. Those are legitimate situations where I would say you probably do need to arrest all of these people because she didn't voluntarily want to have sex with all of these boys. Maybe at this point she is feeling cornered. She's in the room by herself. She can't get out. Random boys coming in and going out. I get it. In that kind of situation, there are particular situations where I can say, absolutely, you should probably feel cornered and threatened. But not if he's sending you a text message, that means you're not around him. It's not like he's going to text you and you sitting right next to him. You're in his dungeon in the basement and he's sending you text messages. If you don't like what you read in those texts, you don't go back. At some point, it's got to kick in that I don't like this. I don't like what I'm looking at in these text messages. It's common fucking sense. But thanks everybody for coming by. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.